Hello, hello. Oh my goodness. I am so excited and thrilled that you have joined me on the Radiant You podcast. This is season 1, episode 2, and this is part 1 of an amazing topic called boundaries and self-love. And I am thrilled that you are here. I am Lisa Cole, your host, and today we're diving into this topic that is so important. Not just important, but it is transformative, can be transformative. The topic is boundaries and how they tie into self-love and radiance. Like I said, this is part 1 of a 3-part series because boundaries deserve a dig deep. Oh my gosh, yes. A really, really deep dive into. So let's do a quick recap of what I talked about last week. I hope you took some time to listen to episode 1 where I explained the core beliefs and values. These are the foundations that define and inspire this journey of the radiance you. The radiant you. And as we explore them together, my hope is that you'll feel just as energized and curious about them as I am. All right, so looking at some amazing things that are happening when I look at the Radiant You podcast, I also look for insights and inspirations that can help us to look at the overall picture of the radiant you and how we can be more radiant every single day. So looking into that, I am excited about the future episodes. And today, though, we are getting started with one of the core foundational pieces of self-love and finding your radiance. We're talking about boundaries. So get ready. Grab a notebook, journal, or something to write with. If you're driving, go back and listen again and answer some of the questions along the way. Take the notes, reach out, ask me the questions as we go, or get a chance, go ahead and message me, and I will certainly help you. Don't forget your coffee, tea, or whatever you need to settle in and fully be in this space with me. Let's do this. All right, so we're breaking into this large topic, and we're going to do this in 3 different podcast episodes. It's just so important that I created an acronym to help explain, and this acronym is based on the word yes. Based on the word you. Okay, did I tell you a long time ago, last week, that this was not perfect? This was not something that, it's going to be just the way it is all the time and just right. No, I am imperfect and I love that. So I'm backing up and we're going to do that part again. This acronym is based on the word you. That is so important to me that we look at you. That's what this is all about. So these boundaries are yours. Your unique boundaries are set up for you. So here's the acronym. Y is for yes. Yes, you're doing this, right? Yes, you are important. You are taking these steps to help you to grow and to be more radiant. The O is about others and ourselves and how those work together, and they do, especially when it comes to boundaries, right? The U is unique and understanding. Gives us a whole nother level of looking at boundaries and being able to say, okay, these are uniquely mine, because you know what? We are all unique. I'm unique. You're unique. All of us are made differently. And hallelujah. So Y-O-U. Today we are starting with why. And I'd like you to just think about how you can be empowered today from this podcast, and even possibly some renewed hope in you and your boundaries. That these boundaries will encourage you to be the most radiant you. Remember, even the smallest acts of self-kindness, intentional decisions, and boundary setting can create a ripple effect that brightens your life. So let's get started with a story or two. So here we go. A little boundary clarification goes a long way. And this is from a book that is the basis for all of my boundary work that I've been able to do over the last 30 years, honestly. And it comes from a book called Boundaries: When to Know, When to Say Yes, When to Know to Say No. The subtitle, I'm not sure. Anyways, yes, I've worked on it for many, many years. However, the authors are amazing. It is Henry Cloud and Townsend. So Cloud and Townsend are the authors, and it's called Boundaries. So go and check that out. There's an older version, and then there's, of course, a newer, updated version too. Both are fabulous. So I'm going to read this story. You ready? The parents of a 25-year-old man came in to see me. This is from Dr. Townsend, and with a common request. They wanted me to fix their son, Bill. When I asked where Bill was, they answered, "Oh, he didn't want to come." "Why?" I asked. "Well, he doesn't think he has a problem," they replied. "Well, maybe he's right," I said, to their surprise. "Tell me about it." They recited a history of problems that had begun at a very young age. Bill had never been quite up to snuff in their eyes. In recent years, he had exhibited problems with drugs and an inability to stay in school and find a career. It was apparent that they loved their son very much and were heartbroken. Over the years, like I said, grab a cup of coffee. They were heartbroken over the way he was living. They had tried everything they knew to get him to change and live a responsible life. But all had failed. He was still using drugs, avoiding responsibility, and keeping questionable company. They told me that they had always given him everything he needed. He had plenty of money at school, so he wouldn't have to work, and he would have plenty of time for studying and social life. When he flunked out of one school or stopped going to classes, they were more than happy to do everything they could to get him into another school, where it might be better for him. After they had talked for a while, I responded, "I think your son is right. He doesn't have a problem." You could have mistaken their expression for a snapshot. They stared at me in true disbelief for a full minute. Finally, the father said, "Did I hear you right? You don't think he has a problem?" "That's correct," I said. "He doesn't have a problem. You do. You pay, you fret, you worry, you plan, you exert energy to keep him going. He doesn't have a problem because you have taken it from him. Those things should be his problem. But as it now stands, they are yours. Would you like for me to help you help him to have some problems?" They looked at me like I was crazy, but some lights were beginning to go on in their heads. "What do you mean, help him to have some problems?" his mother asked. "Well," I explained, "I think that the solution to this problem would be to clarify some boundaries so that his actions cause him problems and not you." "What do you mean, boundaries?" the father asked. "Look at it this way. It is as if he's your neighbor who never waters his lawn. But whenever you turn on your sprinkler system, the water falls on his lawn. Your grass is turning brown and dying. But Bill looks down at his green grass and thinks to himself, my yard is doing fine." That is how your son's life is. He doesn't study or plan or work, yet he has a nice place to live, plenty of money, and all the rights of a family member who is doing his part. If you would define the property lines a little better, if you would fix the sprinkler system so that the water would fall on your own lawn, and if he didn't water his own lawn, he would have to live in dirt. He might not like that after a while, and you are responsible and miserable. As it stands now, he is irresponsible and happy, and you are responsible and miserable. A little boundary clarification would do the trick. You need some fences to keep his problems out of your yard and in his, where they belong. Isn't that a bit cruel just to stop helping like that? The father asked. Has helping him helped? I asked. His look took me that he was beginning to understand. Boundaries define us. They define what is me and what is not me. A boundary shows me where I end and someone else begins, leading me to a sense of ownership. Knowing what I am to own and take responsibility for gives me freedom. If I know where my yard begins and ends, I am free to do with it what I like. Taking responsibility for my life opens up many different options. However, if I do not own my life, my choices and options become very limited. Think how confusing it would be if someone told you to guard this property diligently, because I will hold you responsible for what happens here, and then did not tell you the boundaries of the property, or they did not give you the means with which to protect the property. This would not be only confusing, but also potentially dangerous. This is exactly what happens to us emotionally and spiritually. However, God designed a world where we all live within ourselves. That is, we inhabit our own souls, and we are responsible for the things that make up us. The heart knows its own bitterness, and no one shares its joy. Proverbs 14:10. We have to deal with what is in our soul, and boundaries help us to define what that is. If we are not shown the parameters or are taught wrong parameters, we are in much pain. Here's another story. I once knew a 25-year-old young woman who was experiencing an increase in anxiety and panic attacks. Through therapy and awareness work, she discovered that much of her struggle stemmed from a lack of boundaries. Her childhood had been an enmeshment of contradictions. Strict rules one moment, complete lack of structure the next, high expectations followed by no expectation or indifference. She had spent years trying to decipher the unspoken rules of her family, never quite knowing what version of reality she would wake up to. There were no clear boundaries, not around emotions, not around roles, and not really around love. Despite having a wonderful, supportive husband and 3 beautiful boys, she often felt she wasn't good enough. No matter how much love surrounded her, a voice inside whispered that she was failing, that she should be doing more, being more. She realized that on the core of her anxiety was a deep, unresolved fear. She had never been able to meet her parents' expectations, especially her mother's. Without boundaries, she had absorbed their emotions, their disappointments, their shifting standards as if they were her own. Her mother's love often felt conditional, measured by achievement, appearance, or compliance. Because there had never been clear boundaries in their relationship, she had grown up believing that love had to be earned. As a child, she had learned to read between the lines, molding herself to what was expected in the moment, suppressing her own needs and desires in an attempt to secure approval. But no matter how much she adapted, it never seemed to be enough. And now, as an adult, those blurred boundaries still dictated her sense of self-worth. Through her healing journey, she began to see the patterns clearly. She realized that she had spent years living for external validation, but now she wanted something different for herself and for her children. She didn't want them to grow up feeling like they had to earn the love or any love. She wanted them to know deep in their bones that they were enough just as they were. And that meant learning to create and uphold boundaries with others and within herself. So she began to set boundaries. At first, it was terrifying. Saying no felt like a rejection, like betrayal. But little by little, she practiced. She learned to listen to her own needs, to challenge the automatic guilt that surfaced when she prioritized herself. She redefined what success meant, not as meeting someone else's expectations, but as living in alignment with her own truth. With each boundary she set, she reclaimed a part of herself. As she continued her journey, something remarkable happened. Her anxiety lessened. The panic attacks grew less frequent. She found herself breathing easier, standing taller, feeling more at home in her own skin. And for the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of something she had almost forgotten how to feel: peace. Maybe you are here because you need help with boundaries, like these parents or this 25-year-old young woman. Maybe you don't even know what boundaries are or what your boundaries are. Maybe you're here to refresh your boundaries. We need to be true to ourselves. Sometimes we struggle with that. Today we're going to talk about the you. Y-O-U. The yes, the Y is for yes. The O is for ourselves and others, and the U is for unique and understanding. How would you define a boundary? What do boundaries mean to you? Do you think that you already have boundaries in your life? Too many or too few? Boundaries mean different things to different people. Are there areas where you'd like to set better boundaries? What are your thoughts on why you have or have not been able to set boundaries in these areas? There are 6 types of boundaries: physical, sexual, intellectual, emotional, material, and time. All of these boundaries are contingent upon the specifics of an experience, including your comfort level with the given setting, the parameters of the situation, and the people that you are with. Healthy boundaries are those boundaries that are set to make sure mentally and emotionally you are stable. That comes from Prism Health, North Texas. Another way to think about it is that our boundaries might be rigid, loose, somewhere in between, or even non-existent. Healthy boundaries are those that fall in between. A complete lack of boundaries may indicate that we don't have a strong identity or are enmeshed with someone else's. Clinitis, 2017. Our boundaries are shaped by our heritage, our culture, the region we live in or come from, whether we're introverted, extroverted, or somewhere in between. Our life experiences, our family dynamics. We have all come from unique families of origin. We each make different meanings of situations, and we may change our own boundaries over the years as we mature and our perspectives shift. One standard cannot hold for all. Rather, each person needs to find that level of comfort within themselves. Let's look at the current state of the boundaries in your life to see if there are areas that you'd like to address further. Remember, you can't set boundaries until you know what yours are. For each of the 6 boundary areas, ask yourself, what are your boundaries in this area? What is okay and what is not okay? In what ways would you like to improve this particular boundary area in your life? Are there particular people in your life who make it more or less difficult to set boundaries in this area? Can you think of any ways you set good boundaries of any type? Why do you think it has been difficult or easy to set boundaries in your life? Think of any type. How do you think your life might improve if you set boundaries or maintain what you have? Boundaries are learned. You didn't learn you had rights or boundaries if you weren't valued growing up. Any kind of abuse violates personal boundaries, including teasing. For example, my uncle ignored my begging for him to stop tickling me until I could barely breathe. This made me feel powerless and that I didn't have a right to say stop when I was uncomfortable. In recovery, I gained the capacity to tell a massage therapist to stop and use less pressure. Another example is one that I shared earlier. When parents continue to make comments or snide comments and innuendos that might have brought shame based on their judgments of choices. In recovery, I gained strength and courage to bring their comments to light and ask them to stop hurting me. They respected my request and stopped. In some cases, boundary violations affect a child's ability to mature into an independent, responsible adult. With support and therapy in most cases, there is awareness and healing. At this point, I want to stop and remind you that this podcast is for support, education, and just helping you to become more radiant. If at any point you feel you need to do more work, seek out a professional, counselor, therapist, social worker in your area and do the work. It's amazing. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's self-love. Let's really dive in to the why of the yes. The why of the you. The why is yes. You say yes to you each time that you say no. Think about that. You say yes to you each time that you say no. It builds self-esteem. It builds self-confidence. But it usually takes encouragement to make yourself a priority and to persist, especially when you receive pushback. Setting healthy boundaries permits you to be you. It communicates what you stand for, what you are willing to do, and what you will never do. There are guidelines you set in order to let others know what is okay and not okay with you. It's telling the truth about how you feel and about what you do and do not want and need. Awareness helps with the healing and self-love. Self-love means prioritizing ourselves and giving ourselves permission to find and believe in our strengths and gifts. Sometimes it means putting ourselves first because it means making space to identify our needs and wants. It involves setting boundaries, and setting boundaries involves self-love. What are your rights? It is important in setting boundaries to identify your basic human rights. Judith Belmont, a mental health author and licensed psychotherapist, offers a few of the following examples. I have a right to say no without feeling guilty. No, period. It's a complete sentence. No. There's no need for a story attached to it. It's just no. I have a right to be treated with respect. If we don't have boundaries, how are we going to know if we're being disrespected? I have a right to make my needs as important as others. Yes. There's a lot more I could say about that. And I will. I have a right to be accepting of my mistakes and failures. I learn from them. I have a right not to meet others' unreasonable expectations of myself. I suggest going and looking at more and more of those rights. It's pretty amazing. In fact, I will make sure that there is a copy of what Judith had put into a really great form, and we'll see how that goes. All right, anyways, continuing on. Once you identify your rights and choose to believe in them, you'll find honoring them easier. When you honor them, you'll stop spending energy pacifying or pleasing others who dishonor them, and you'll love yourself more. Boundaries come in different shapes, sizes, and forms. Different boundaries for different people. We mentioned all of the different boundaries the areas in which we have boundaries. And we're going to just dive in a little bit more here. Physical barriers provide space and control over our bodies, while emotional boundaries encompass taking responsibility for our feelings. Our feelings boundary violations can occur in the context of over-functioning people pleasing and enabling. Some may think that having healthy, solid boundaries means keeping others away or not allowing others to control or manipulate us. Unhealthy boundaries work both ways. Do you have a hard time turning down requests? Refusing requests can feel uncomfortable, especially if you think that others might get upset. Other times, we might not believe our needs are essential. When building self-love, it is important to learn to practice saying no. Some people feel compelled to give a reason or an excuse. Many times, though, it is not necessary. You do not have to share your story. It is okay to say no and not give a reason. You don't have to justify or explain yourself. The goal is to have confidence in your decisions. Speaking of self-love, let's look at you and how your boundaries affect your mental health. The need for better boundaries can be sneaky. When we feel overwhelmed, overextended, resentful, or exhausted, we are often quick to point fingers to an external problem, person, or situation that is making us feel this way. And sometimes that is warranted. Many times, however, we can draw a direct path from our distress to unhealthy boundaries in our lives. Let's explore how unhealthy boundaries may be present in your life and how they might be impacting your mental health. There is typically a direct relationship between how well we set and then honor our boundaries and how well we take care of ourselves. Exploring this relationship with self-care and self-love in our life, your life, self-care is truly defined as any restorative mental, spiritual, emotional, or physical practice that rejuvenates, relaxes, and enhances our life. This can include creating space for activities that bring you joy, such as certain hobbies or indulgences. While pampering yourself can be a form of self-care and self-love, most self-care does not involve spending any money. In reality, it's about showing up for yourself by setting boundaries. This can involve making a decision because it's healthy for you, even when you know it will be tough. For example, you may choose to spend less time with people who drain your energy, or could make a point to speak more kindly to yourself when you make a mistake. Either way, self-care and self-love allows you to cultivate the best version of yourself and replenish your well-being. What is replenishing to one person might not be to someone else. So the important thing about self-care and self-love is to find what is restorative to you. How might healthier boundaries provide your ability to engage in self-care and self-love? The most common problem that people report with self-care is that they are unable to find time for it. They are so focused on meeting other people's needs that they get roped into endless activities and obligations, and the thought of squeezing in one more thing into an already packed schedule can feel overwhelming. Although it can be hard to put your needs first, it is important to learn how to say no to things that rob you of valuable time and that don't contribute to your growth. If you don't protect your peace and put yourself first, you won't have any energy to give to anyone else. You can't pour from an empty cup. I often remind my clients that even the airlines understand the need for self-care. When the oxygen masks drop, we are to put ours on first before helping another. In order to help you make time for self-care and self-love, it is time for you to do an audit on how you spend your time on a daily and weekly basis. Then brainstorm where you can set boundaries to allow more self-care into your life. There are 164 hours in a week. Did you know that? Did you know that we had that much time in a week? What do you do with them? What patterns do you see in how you spend your time? Which parts of your day or week make you feel good? Where do you see radiance? Do you see areas where you can set limits to allow for more self-care and self-love time? What would these new, healthier boundaries look like? How do you think others might respond if you set boundaries to prioritize your self-love. Now that we've looked at how boundaries affect our mental health and self-care and self-love, let's see how setting boundaries helps our stress management. Well, first, it helps by maintaining balance. When we don't set boundaries on what we will say yes and no to, we tend to take on more responsibility than we're comfortable with, just to please others. You can add stress by doing this as we try to navigate a lifestyle that is too busy for our comfort level. Setting healthy boundaries helps us to maintain the right balance in our schedules and in our lives. Another is keeping conflict minimal. That's very helpful with our stress management. And that's what boundaries do. When we say yes to things that would be better addressed with a no, we tend to feel resentful after a while. Some of us may not realize that we have a hand in our own overly busy schedule. I often will say to my assistant and to my other clinicians that I'm the only one to blame for my crazy schedule. I see a lot of clients, but I'm the only one. It's my own hand that takes care of that schedule. While others of us may be mad at ourselves for letting it happen, whatever our perceptions, we do know that we feel stressed and that we resent that feeling. If we feel resentful and frustrated by the situation we face, or direct feelings toward the people who are pushing our boundaries, we can end up feeling alienated from the very people that we're trying to be nice to, or damaging the relationships we're intending to strengthen. And we all know how much stress relationship conflict can cause. Maintaining healthy boundaries lets others know where we stand with us and can allow us to avoid causing additional conflict in our relationships due to resentments and other negative feelings caused by poor boundaries. Another amazing point, setting boundaries actually promotes closeness. It bears mentioning that a common misconception about personal boundaries is that keeping everyone in our lives at arm's length is the same as having strong, healthy boundaries. In fact, allowing others to get close to us without overwhelming us is the true goal of boundary setting. Healthy boundaries allow us to have close relationships that respect the need of all involved. Most of us have some people in our lives who require a different type of response and indeed need to be kept at arm's length, or sometimes farther, because they do not respect the boundaries we set. But the majority of people can be allowed to get close to us without stepping on our toes, if only we let them know where we stand. Here's the thing. Brené Brown says, after many years of research, the boundaries are not about them. They are about you. Boundaries are not a wall or a moat around your heart. They are the path to self-respect. Boundaries are the path to self-respect. Boundaries are saying that I choose self-love and self-respect over what you think of me or the possibility of disappointing you. Creating boundaries in your relationships is an essential path toward finding happiness in our lives, engaging in conversations where we honor our feelings and need while also honoring others' experience. We create a climate for the intimate, loving relationships that we long for. Say yes to you and your boundaries. Say yes to you. Next time, we continue with our boundary work by exploring the O of you, the others and ourselves. Letting things slide to keep the peace only starts a war inside of you. That's Mel Robbins. Let me say that again. Letting things slide to keep the peace only starts a war inside of you. The bottom line is that setting healthy boundaries in relationships is a key skill for relationship stress management. It's a key skill in taking care of you, helping you to be more radiant. It is a kindness we can do for ourselves as well as those we are close to. When one person is in control of another, love cannot grow deeply and fully, as there is no freedom. That's Townsend and Cloud. When one person is in control of another, love cannot grow deeply and fully, as there is no freedom. In other words, healthy boundaries can be the difference between a healthy, happy relationship and a toxic, dysfunctional one. Don't draw your boundaries in permanent ink. It's good to think about them occasionally and reassess. When boundaries are too rigid or inflexible, problems can occur. Boundaries are essential to self-love. Saying yes to yourself is empowering, and awareness is the first step toward change. You're doing it. Take time to reflect on your boundaries. Pick one area to focus on and ask yourself, what's okay? What's not okay? Where can you be more radiant this week? Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this episode spoke to you, please hit subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone you care about. Let's grow this radiant, self-loving, boundary-respecting community together. I really want you to know how thankful I am for you being here and for choosing to nurture your light. Remember, radiance is a journey, and simply showing up means that you're already on the right path. Together, we'll explore what it truly means to embrace, celebrate, and shine as your beautiful, radiant self. Until next time, remember, saying yes to yourself is the ultimate act of self-love. Shine your light and be the radiant you. Bye-bye.